the arts and humanities here from Cultureplex. Jaigris Hodson, who spoke this morning, Dominic, who spoke this morning, and Michael Carter from Ryerson Digital Zone, and also a PhD student in the Department of Anthropology here. So what I've tasked these guys to do, these people to do, is to sort of pick up on some of the themes that were talked about this morning that can be sort of translated as challenges for the discussion groups this afternoon, and also to offer their own spin on what they heard and where they think things should be going or where they're not going. And then once they've done that, we'll do our first breakout. And as I said, we're kind of winging this, so we'll see how that goes. And I'm also pleased to say that our guest speaker, John Sebastian Michel, has arrived, and he's going to kind of float around as discussions go, and he's doing some last minute checks to his paper. So, panel, would you like to start?
I'll start. I'm just gonna list a few issues that have been coming up in several of the talks, and somehow I think that will have to be discussed and talked about today and in the months to come. The first one is that we have been talking about big data as something that it will be coming in the future, but I guess that after the presentations of research already being done, in such a wide spectrum of fields and perspectives, I think we can agree that big data is already here and it's present. The problem that raises, one of the problems is most of people here are interested already doing research on big data. What do we do with the rest of people in departments, faculties, in arts and humanities, social sciences, who are not touched by this? How this is going to be this movement is going to be affected by these people? Can we bring them on board, or what we can do with all this? Both at the level of the faculty, but also at the level of undergraduate curriculum. Also related to this issue is how are we going to shape up the whole big data movement in arts and in social sciences and humanities. Second issue, which has been already addressed in part by SHERC and the consultation that they started a few months ago, and hopefully we will know a little more in the next few weeks or months, is the problem of storage and maintenance. We don't know if finally SHERC is going to open a competition to create several data centers for social sciences and humanities around the country, but even so, if there's some money for infrastructure and to do that, how are we going to deal with all these issues? We've seen the problems of the size, the cost, the velocity of the data. How do we want to deal with that? Third question, more general, is big data is changing the questions that we ask in arts and humanities? If so, are the disciplines really changing because of the process of digitalization and big data that we are suffering? In that respect, can we imagine, can we plan how our disciplines are going to look like in 5 years? I think this is also a very important concern. And finally, we have been talking about silos in data, which somehow, or that's the impression I got, reflect a structure of silos in disciplines, in ways of thinking, in bureaucratic barriers, etc. If we are able to break those silos in data, does it also mean that we have to finally change our attitude and start breaking down the barriers that form the silos in our disciplines? How are we going to do this? So these are my 4 main issues of this morning. Thank you.
Thanks. I think I want to focus to start on the third V, so variety. What really struck me about being here today especially, but over the last 2 days, was the variety of applications for big data just in social science and humanities alone. So today in our presentations, we saw people using sometimes similar data sets, sometimes very disparate data sets, but all in very different and unique ways. So I think when we think about variety as it applies to big data, we're also talking about the variety of methodological approaches, or a variety of ontologies, which was brought up today. But in that, there lies a distinct and very unique challenge, I think. And I'm thinking now of some of the filtering that I discussed earlier. So, for example, Google filtering. Once you define a set of filters with which to look at your data, sometimes that creates the very silos that we think need to be broken down. And that's another sense that I got today from all the presentations, is the way we define our categories begins to matter in a much bigger way than it did before, especially when we're asking those big questions of big data. So I think the question of ontologies and how do we define, how do we quantify what's important, how do we make sense of all this knowledge that's all around us. And then finally, I would like to just throw out there something maybe that was missing from all of the presentations today, including my own, which is, where is qualitative analysis, and what does that look like in a world of big data? So maybe that's something that we need to explore a little more, that we can bring out of the presentations from today. So, thank you very much.
I'm kind of the down-to-the-earth guy. I'm more concerned about the infrastructures. Infrastructure doesn't mean hardware or software, or hardware-software combined, but hardware, software, and services combined to support research. So because I'm kind of focused on that, I can tell you a couple of things in the past few months that is related to that. One is the TC3 Plus consultation. I think Ted mentioned that the report, or the digestion of those who put in since December 16 last year, it's going to come out very soon. And one of the things that I know they are going to ask for is, in the futures, all the research, it doesn't matter if it is social science or natural science, as long as you produce data, you have to commit to share those data. Now, how can you share those data if you don't have a place to put it? And how can you share the data if where you put the data is so difficult to access? Or it is easy to access, but there is no tool to analyze it, right? So those are the issues that I think we should think about it. And the second experience I have is, as I mentioned in my talk, last January, we had this Digital Infrastructure Summit in Ottawa. The report out of that summit has just come out last Wednesday. I would encourage you folks to take a look at it. There are several different issues related to how to support a digital scholarship. And one of the things that I mentioned in my presentation is about a pilot. I think that is some things that you folks have to think about. And in that pilot, the working group that I belong to actually suggests one of the target database or data depository needs to come from social science and humanities research. So hopefully you folks can take a look at that and consider participating in the pilot in a meaningful way, so that your community can benefit right from start. The kind of so-called data centers, funding and all these things, it's too far out for me. If big data is already here, then the best way to address that would be to participate in the pilot. That's the fastest way to get you guys up to speed.
Thank you. Those are ominous words. So a couple of things kind of hit me as we were listening to today's presentations as well as yesterday's. The first question I had is really for Dominic, because he talks about Watson with a very loving, fatherly approach, and I tend to think to myself, what's Watson going to be like when he's a teenager? Are we going to have to lock up the liquor cabinet? Are we going to have to sit him down and have a conversation about what type of data he should be inputting and what type he shouldn't? So it concerns me a little bit that we're getting to the process now in which intelligent computers or intelligent data centers or intelligent analytical processes are starting to mimic what we're doing. And so I say that only as a cautionary note, because technology is a backbone infrastructure, it's hardware, it's software, but what gives that backbone, that Watson, the humanistic component, is us. We're the ones that give it society, culture, understanding of what it means to be human and making human decisions. So that's sort of my fatherly advice to Dominic. And I have two boys too. One of the things that really hit me was the selective data retention process that everybody talked about. Big data is a term, and that term has left the station, and we're running after it. You know, we are generating data in obscene amounts. From an archaeological perspective, and being an archaeologist, I love to have all the data, and I want to keep it forever, and I want to go back and I want to mine it, and I want to compare it to other data sources and so forth. What concerns me is that we're already, because we're creating so much data, we're being very selective now, or we're having to create selective processes to determine what is most unique about the data that we're generating. Or the other option is, and I'm sure IBM would love this, just buy more data centers, right? So I think one of the things we should kind of take a look at is, from a social science and humanities perspective, is are we the arbiters of selecting what is the best data to keep and what isn't? And if we are, are there any mechanisms that we need to put in place in order to determine if there is data that we've let loose or that we need to track? How do we do that? Is that good? Any other comments?
Thank you very much for that. And just to remind everybody, that I may have said this before, I'm not sure I'm thinking properly right now. There are two main objectives to get out of this afternoon, or three, I suppose. One is just to get everybody talking, but the two substantive ones are we will generate a report out of the discussions and notes from the talks and things today, and that's going to have two objectives. One is for SSHRC, to help SSHRC shape their policy decision-making processes on big data in the social sciences and humanities, and the other is more local. That's arising out of yesterday's event here was Big Data at Western. That is in conjunction with the Cluster of Research Excellence Initiative, which has gone out as a letter of intent stage. Should that move to the development of a full proposal, the notes from today are going to be a very important part of that, and indeed you guys may be victims that we will reach out to talk to be tapping on for resources. And again, I did mention before, one of the most important things is this is a SSHRC sponsored event, so that's obviously the focus of the day. But this work is inherently multidisciplinary, and so having people from other disciplines commenting, making suggestions, saying no, don't do it that way, do it this way, is actually extremely valuable. So input is welcome from absolutely everybody at this stage. So with that, the first breakout session, we're just sort of pitching out two questions. What is big data and what is digital literacy? But I think you can think of it more broadly as what are the key sort of definitional things that we need to sort of operationalize so that we can move on in the discussion together. And I think Allison had the definition yesterday of what is big data. It's like teenage sex. Everybody talks about it. Nobody really knows what it is, and everybody thinks everybody else is doing it. That sort of thing. I think there are lots of different definitions for big data, and I think that's rich. I think what we need to do is think about what are those definitions and where are they coming from. So who is using definition X? Who is using definition Y? So when we start to facilitate communication across these silos to try and bring the silos together, if we've got a common lexicon, or at least that we can understand how the other people are using the same word, then so much the better. The second is what is digital literacy, and I think the most important aspect of this is in terms of graduate training. HQP was that dreadful acronym, was highly qualified personnel, was raised a couple times this morning. Student training is very important. What do we need to be imparting to our students? Okay, there are a couple different perspectives. Do the students do they need to be coders? Do they not need to be coders? Do you need to be intelligent consumers? What are the issues there? But beyond those two definitions, I think Dom, what's infrastructure? And that was a really interesting discussion that emerged from the discussion surrounding the cluster letter of intent. What is infrastructure? Well, I have one thought about what infrastructure is, but I mean, what you just rolled out there is a much broader conception. I think that's really important to bring out. What are analytics? Right? Is there one definition for analytics, or lots of definitions for analytics? And so, if there are other sort of definitional things that you could identify as a group that you think are important and should be part of this sort of early operationalization discussion, then by all means, bring those to the fore. Okay. So with that, it's your turn now, guys.